Hi, my name is Rob Garrison, and I'm the CEO of Mercado Labs. Welcome to the 11th edition of the First Things First podcast, where we interview thought leaders from across venture, media, and industry. Last month's guest was Scott Felsenthal. Scott is the fourth generation and CEO of Whitmore Industries. And Whitmore is an incredible company. They make home organization supplies and sell to big retailers like Target, Container Store, Amazon, etc. Just a really great company. Encourage you to check them out. It was an amazing episode, and I would encourage you to check out Scott's comments about the supply chain industry. One of my favorite quotes from Scott was, "Supply chain used to be a department at Whitmore, and now it's our company." And I really think that resonates with most people, especially with what we've gone through in the last couple of years. So for today's guest, I'd like to welcome John Fitzgerald. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rob. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward to this, John. So just for an introduction for everybody, John's got more than 40 years in the supply chain industry. And I refer to John as the Kevin Bacon of the supply chain industry, actually, because I've never met anybody who doesn't know John or isn't at least not more than 6 degrees of separation from John. So that's my name, my endearing name or respectful name for John is the Kevin Bacon of supply chain industry. I first met John at the very beginning of my career based on a recommendation from a client, actually, a mutual client in Chicago. And so Jackie from Spiegel said, "Rob, you have to meet this guy. He's incredible." And John, hopefully you remember that. What I would say is Jackie was right, and I've been a huge fan of John's ever since. So John's had an amazing career and life in the supply chain industry, which I can't do justice to. So I'm going to let John kind of give you his journey. But what I can say is that he's always been on the forefront or the leading edge of really innovative companies. I don't know if that was by design or by chance, but he worked for a company at the beginning of his career that was super innovative in their space, really a trendsetter. Progressed to a couple technology companies that were also on the leading edge, and now currently works for a company who's just setting the industry on fire. So John's not only a great person and lots of experience in the industry, but he's also been able to work for some really progressive, innovative companies. So you'll hear that journey. So with that, John, could you please walk us through your remarkable journey in industry? And you can start anywhere you want and go anywhere you want. Take your time.
Well, great. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. My mother wrote that for you. I know that.
Yeah, it's great to catch up with you.
You're being very modest because I've learned as much from you and more in the years as we go back. Your experience is tremendous on both the shipper side and the FedExes and obviously Sears and Michaels. In fact, you even fired us at Michaels when you were
You don't have to bring that up, John.
Yeah. But I love the name of this, First Things First, because you and I agree on this issue that I actually won a debate in 2013 at Northwestern on last mile when I talked all about first mile, and I said if the first mile isn't right, there is no last mile, there is no fulfillment, there is no direct to consumer. So I really do like that. But yeah, I think to talk about my career, certainly I didn't major in supply chain. It didn't even exist. I'll go back to my college days. I was in marketing and data processing was my minor.
Oh, man.
That's what they called it then. And we would do programming in Fortran and COBOL and 1402 punch cards. And I'm about as far from being a software developer as you can imagine. My kids all say, "Dad, I can't believe you're in technology. You can't even work the TV remote." but I did start in the technology side with IBM, and I was with IBM, and then Vietnam hit, and I went in the Marines. I was a captain in the Marines, and for whatever reason, right or wrong, when I got back, I said, I think transportation is the future. And I went to airborne freight, which is no longer around, but it's the DHL of today. Yeah. But when I got there, I've always been two things: customer focused and think outside the box. And when I got there, it was obvious you'd go in and make a sales call. Then I'd say, "Hey, I want all your air freight." And they said, "We don't have any air freight. We just ship ocean." I said, "Oh my God." So what I did, I ran the terminal at O'Hare Field for airborne. So I brought in a ocean freight forwarder, Midwest Overseas. I brought in customs and gave them an office. I brought in Harry F. Long, which was a local broker. I don't even know if they're around anymore. And I told our salespeople, we're selling multimodal. We're selling everything.
Really? I didn't hear that. I never heard that story. That's great.
So anyway, I was there. Airborne not only didn't buy my multimodal vision, they went and bought airplanes. And I said, "Oh, this isn't the place for me. I don't want to be in just selling airspace. So that's when Fritz companies came along, and they were the largest customs broker. They did ocean freight. So they had more services, and they needed someone to start air freight. So I started Fritz Air Freight in Chicago.
Hey, John, can I pause you just for 1 second?
Yeah.
I talked about all the innovative companies you worked for, and really beginning with Fritz. Do you mind, before you finish your story, just telling everybody Fritz doesn't exist anymore? It's now UPS Supply Chain Solutions. Can you give everybody a little bit of what is Fritz? Because Fritz at one time was the company in this industry.
Great. I'm sorry for jumping ahead there. So it was Arthur J. Fritz and Companies, became Fritz Companies. 1933, they were a spinoff from the old Harper Robinson, and they were a regional customs broker that had offices in San Francisco, LA, and then they started expanding after the war to when different ports would close down or during the war, and they moved to New Orleans and the East Coast and ended up with about 60 offices around the United States, the largest customs broker in the United States. We were 1.5 billion when UPS bought us in 2001. Expeditors was a distant second. They were about 500 million at the time.
You just can't resist that, John, can you?
I can't. But Len Fritz was a visionary, and he said, we can't just be a customs broker. We have to help these customers with he was talking supply chain. There wasn't the name for it, but end to end when we were there back in the 80s. And we said, hey, we're going to clear it for you. We may as well fly it for you. We'll do the origin cargo. I remember going in early 70s to Taiwan, setting up, origin consolidation management and tracking POs. Obviously all manual then. Of course, as you know, many customers are still manual, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right.
But anyway, then we expanded. And when I was there, I said, we got to offer more. So I added on warehousing distribution. We started doing that. We ended up with about 30 million square foot in warehousing. We did, I added on duty drawback, marine insurance. I was a marine insurance broker. So anything the customer needed, we tried to become a one-stop shop. So that was Fritz. But then we got bought by UPS, and we become part of obviously a big company. And I'd learned the value of technology when I was at Fritz, because we were one of the first companies that actually started talking about visibility, even though we didn't have any of the tools we have today. It was really an EDI environment, as you know. And when I got to UPS, they certainly had a lot of technology, but most of it was for themselves internally, to manage their own business, not necessarily for the customers. So that's when I really changed careers, honestly. And that's when went over to GT Nexus. And as you know,
hey, John, I'm sorry, I'm going to pause you one more time because you're selling yourself a little bit short. So when Fritz was acquired by UPS, I believe, in my mind anyway, that was the foundation of what then became Supply Chain Solutions at UPS. Yes. So they created a whole division around that. It existed, but I think Fritz was really the impetus for them creating what is now Supply Chain Solutions. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a kind of a rude awakening for me, because I remember being on one of the first calls, and all these UPS people are on. I said, well, listen, we're going to have to, move this through the CFCY and Ningbo, and then we're going to put it on the NVO and track it to SKU level. And they said, stop. What is all that?
Yeah, I remember a lot of that, right? A lot of explanations. Right?
Then I remembered that they were just tracking packages in brown trucks. Life should be so easy. But so anyway, when I was there, it just wasn't much fun for me, and I wanted to keep doing things outside the box. So GT Nexus came around and said, hey, we're doing things in the cloud. And I have to admit, I said, what the hell's a cloud? So this is 2010, I was still going to the bank, cashing my checks, and they're talking about, and something, didn't you get PayPal and Elon Musk, and the rest is history, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But anyway, GT Nexus was really providing that connectivity. Unfortunately, all EDI, not modern technology, but connectivity to the factories, to the PO, and providing that element to it. And it was really, a good company. And as you know, then sold to Infor, and then became part of another larger organization that wasn't directly focused on supply chain and the kind of things that you live every day. And I, at the time, was trying to get GT Nexus to say, hey, we should be doing APIs. I heard APIs are what the finance, has used for 20 years, and we're still doing EDI, which is 1948 technology from the Berlin airlift. It's one-way communication. FedEx told us they had 100 people in Memphis on the LTL side just answering calls. Did you get my EDI message? Are you going to pick it up? Is there a POD? This all goes away with real-time APIs, as you know. So that's when Jet McCandless came to me and said, hey, you really ought to come here and grow this company. And I said, wow. I said, you want me? I'm a dinosaur. I don't. He said, we've got all the really, the very, very smart people, I'll call them. Data scientists now. We have 30 data scientists. And as you know, I've been teaching forever. I do believe in lifelong learning and learning something new every day, as we all do, if we're listening. And but I when I came down here to Florida, Florida Gulf Coast University didn't have a supply chain program. I met the dean over a beer, and I said, hey, I'll help you start it. So we started it, and I presented to the dean and all the professors. And down here, they have no tenure. So if they don't do a good job, they're out. So I presented in 2016. I wished I had a camera when I told them all your books are outdated. Technology can't be a separate track. It's got to be integrated with operations management. That's supply chain. And I said, in 5 years, you'll be graduating data scientists. Well, they started graduating data scientists a couple of years ago. So it's really changed. I saw an ad this morning, the Dolphins, Miami Dolphins. I'm a Bears fan. They're horrible. But the Dolphins were talking about their data scientists and how they measure all the speed. And I remember I spoke in Brazil, and I did a whole thing on the data science that they use and statistics on Neymar, and on Messi and all the moves they make and there's more data on soccer and baseball than there is on supply chain.
Yeah, we saw Moneyball, right? We both watched Moneyball at one point.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I'd say that's really where I came. I do believe in there's tremendous opportunities now for young people in supply chain. It's probably the hottest major around. I'm still active at ASU, sometimes at Penn State, Northwestern. I just spoke a few weeks ago. It's a great area, and of course, technology is a key part of it now. So it's people, process, technology. You can't have one without the other.
That's a perfect summary. John, before we go to the next thing, I think most of the people on this podcast will know or have heard of Project 44, but just if I could hit the pause button one more time, and maybe you talked about APIs, but can you give everybody just an overview of who is P44? I've been on the sidelines of watching that journey, and it's been incredible, but nobody better than you to kind of highlight who is P44 and what have they become.
Well, thank you. We're not here to talk about P44 today, but I'll answer that question. Jet McCandless could certainly do a better job. He's the founder. We're 8 years old, started in Chicago. And Jet was believe it or not, a dispatcher with, I think, Yellow at the time. And when he was in the dispatch office, people would call in and say, when am I getting my shipment? He'd turn around to his boss and he'd say, tell him 15 minutes. And the next call would come, and he'd say to his boss, when are they going to get it? Tell him 15 minutes. Well, he realized very quickly they had no idea when the shipments were going to be delivered. So he said there's got to be a better way. And that's when he really came up with the whole idea of changing the transportation industry and visibility so people could see things as real time as possible. EDI was not the way to go. So we're an API first company. Obviously, then enhanced with machine learning, IoTs, if there's devices on the product, AI, weather, developing predictive ETAs so people know when is it going to arrive at the DC or the manufacturing site or the store. So it's a connective tissue from first mile. We track all the way from China to Kansas City to your door to last mile. So it's we're now 1,300 people in 35 countries. It's an amazing ride. When I started, we had 40 people in one office in Chicago. So,
oh my gosh, I didn't know that part of the story. That's amazing. So congrats to you and the success on that journey. Let me change the direction if I could, John, just a little bit. So, everybody knows about the last 3 years. We talk about the last 3 years a lot, but to me, it almost feels like, it was a snow globe where we sort of, everything got picked up and shaken. So what I perceived as a once pretty dependable, reliable industry, the one that we grew up in, the international supply chain, just got completely turned upside down. So I'd be curious to hear your impression of the last 3 years and how you think a predictable business got turned upside down, or even just your thoughts on what happened in the first place. Because for a person who's been doing this for a long time, like you have, it was remarkable how quickly, in my opinion, that the industry fell apart. Do you have any insight or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I call that the year the earth stood still, right? obviously, the business as well as or better than I do. I always thought we had infrastructure problems to begin with, right? So,
Yeah.
but this problem was so different because it was global. It was, it was everywhere. It was all at once. It's not like a hurricane in Florida. I live in Florida, so if we got a hurricane, yeah, we're all concerned. The rest of you in the country don't give a damn. But with the pandemic and the supply chain, it was impacting all of us. And I was actually speaking in Northwestern. I'll never forget it. November 10th of 21. That's the Marine Corps birthday. And the president came out and said, "We're going to solve the problem. They're going to be open 24 hours." And I went, "Oh my God, geez, the terminal's all independently owned. They're going to say, no way. There's nowhere to put the containers. There's no trucks to pick them up. The warehouses aren't open." So we have this, obviously, as domino effect. And so it didn't surprise me. The severity of it did. I mean, because I always knew that someday it's going to break. I mean, when you're loading 60 containers an hour in Ningbo and you're only unloading 15 an hour in LA, you got a problem if there's no problem, right? So, and it hasn't ended, right? I mean, that contract's not signed. The rail still, so we have some issues there. But yeah, it was very interesting. You may have heard the comment now, the never normal. That's what we're living in now. Peter Henson has coined that, the never normal. It's never going to go back to normal. So it's all about how resilient are you? How good is your information? How real time is it? How are you sharing that information across your teams? And what happened? We had customers. What I saw happen is we had customers calling and say, "We don't know where our shipments are." "What do you mean you know where your shipments are?" "Well, we use 5 steamship lines and 10 forwarders and 4 brokers, and we got Excel spreadsheets that are out of date, and we have to call them." And I go, "Oh my God." So it became very apparent that people did not know where their stuff was, did not know where's my order, couldn't tell their customers, which, as caused problems. All the empty shelves. So I'm not going to rehash all that, but it became evident that customers that told us, "Hey, we'll talk to you, Project 44, in 2 or 3 years," they're calling us saying, "Hey, what can we do now? What can we do?" My CEO's saying, "Where's all my stuff? I can't tell them." So we actually got pushed up. I would say visibility got pushed up. Maybe they were going to do a TMS and we were going to be next. We always said, "Hey, you can do them. One doesn't have to be one after the other." So we started implementing companies and giving them visibility to where their stuff was, even though a TMS would probably take 18 months and we were up in 6 to 8 weeks. So
yeah, so 2 things I'd like to kind of weave off of that question. So you said something super interesting to me. I guess I hadn't thought about it the same way you said it, which is, from your perspective, none of these challenges we faced were new. They just got radically exposed when things got turned upside down. Would that be a fair?
All at once. Because
all at once.
We used to have a disruption here. Well, that was only in Liverpool, or it's in Korea, like right now, right? This was everywhere. So it became a problem globally.
And the other thing you said that I just want to make sure the audience understands is that even though there's not a connective tissue, which there should be, the supply chain is not much different than a human body in that everything in some way or another is interconnected, right? And just because things aren't connected doesn't mean if you hurt your hand, there's not going to be an impact somewhere else in terms of what you can do. And so you also talked about one domino fell and another domino fell because the infrastructure wasn't good to begin with. And when it started to get exposed all at once, the problems were exacerbated by the fact that things weren't connected. Is that also a fair assessment, or am I?
Absolutely. I mean, it really is a network. It's an ecosystem, call it different things, but we are all interconnected. There's no one, we're a data aggregator. We get that data to great systems like yours or from you into other systems of record. It's sharing that data so we all have that look. A lot of customers got caught with all their eggs in one basket in China. So they were really hurting. And so now if they're going to do, as they're going to start doing dual sourcing, multiple sourcing, move to Vietnam, India, Mexico, or reshoring, whatever you want to call it. It's depending on the situation. This could, they've got all new suppliers, new carriers, new communication. And they're doing a lot of this manually, sending emails with PDFs. I mean, my God, it's got to be a nightmare. So that's why, but people don't think of the things that have to be done to make that work. And that's where people like you come in and we come in. They're talking about, moving the chips back here. It takes years to build a chip factory. So what do you do in the meantime? So this is the challenge that all of us have together to work through.
Well, you might have preempted my next question, but what I was thinking about as you were talking and the question I had for you in advance is, if you look at all those things that we exposed and all those things that were broken and all those things that were mismatched and your explanation of why they were mismatched, my question was around the role that technology either didn't play because it didn't exist, and or the role that you see it will play going forward. And you've kind of touched on both of those, but if you could put a pin on that, what would you say about the role of technology as a path forward? Because I couldn't agree with you more that the networks are complex. There's lots and lots of data, lots and lots of providers. It needs to be connected. So how do you see that coming together? Do you think that's through partnerships, or do you think there's going to be a company that's going to emerge that can put this all together?
I don't think there's any one silver bullet. I really think we call it network-wide collaboration, that we all have
network-wide collaboration. Okay.
I wrote a little white paper called "Little Data Eats Big Data for Lunch," and the whole point of that was that you need all the data to solve. If you optimize one area, you sub-optimize another. So you really need to look at the whole supply chain, don't you? So,
yes.
I remember when I was a forwarder, you call on somebody and he'd say, "Hey, I want the cheapest rate you got." And then I go talk to the sales manager and she says, "I want the fastest service you got." Well, wait a minute, you're not going to get that. So, but I think technology, the role it can play is to really move us from a manual environment to a digital environment where you see everything together. I call it a fishbowl. We're all seeing the same data. We might want to look at it differently. If I'm a buyer, right, and I'm looking for these ugly shirts, for Father's Day or something, then I don't know where they are. The transportation guy and the DC manager, when's that coming here? When do I unload it? I got to plan my labor. I don't want the tension to merge. I mean, there's so many aspects where the data can help people, solve these issues. It used to be, as you know, I started with transportation, then logistics, now supply chain. People are looking at total cost. And as you know, it used to be, you sat on both sides. It used to be really cost driven. Now it's things like customer experience, productivity of my employees. Everybody has less employees. What can we automate here to take these mundane activities off these people, right? Where can we better collaborate? What about sustainability? We have more and more customers want our CO2 emissions data so they can decide in their bids, who do they use? What ocean carrier? What truck carrier? So it's
so significantly more complexity. And I just go back to your statement at the beginning. You said if the first mile is right, the final mile is not going to be there. But another way you could say it is a pitch and a catch. And so being able to make sure you know who the pitcher is and the catcher is helps you resolve a lot of the issues that you talked about. So let me move to a different direction, John, if I could. We've got about 8 minutes left. But if you could give us your crystal ball, where do you see the next big challenges coming from? Do you think it's going to be, you started talking about consumer activism when you talk about brands and ESG. Is it going to be China? Is it going to be the Europe-Ukraine issue? Are these the type of things that we should be looking at now? Is it keeping customers awake? Where do you see this whole industry headed? So we had an industry that was relatively predictable but broken. We saw that thing shaken up. And now, to your point, we've got even more challenges coming upon us than we've ever had before. So if you had a crystal ball, what do you see us doing differently to keep up with all of that?
Well, I don't know how you feel about this, but our CEO Jet says we are 1% of the way there. I just think in talking to people that I'll bet you they're in 5% of the companies that are truly digital in their supply chain. They still have many manual workarounds, different systems. I won't mention one client, but they said, "Oh yeah, we just built a data lake and we connected our 13 internal systems." And I said, "Yeah, can you tell me where your PO is in Indonesia?" "Oh, don't have a clue." 80% of the data that a company needs to manage their supply chain is outside the four walls. So until you connect all of that, so I think that's the opportunity. I already started talking about China, and if you start moving to new areas, you're still gonna have to have a something like Mercado to onboard those suppliers and have visibility to it. With the inflation coming, we feel it's going to get worse. As you're already seeing a ton of layoffs, Amazon, et cetera. It's going to get worse. We see it through at least half of, if not more, of 23. People are going to have less people. They're going to have to do more with less. They're going to have to automate more and automate from the first mile to the last mile, wherever they can. Actually, it makes their employees' lives much better when they can be working with new technology and not old green bars.
Worker satisfaction is a big one for sure.
Yeah. So that I think we're getting a lot of requests for. Again, I mentioned the emissions, and that area is very important. The more pressure, especially from young people, on where is it made? Is it conflict minerals, slave labor? We can't address all of that, but we came out with a index. I'm hearing a sound here. We came out with a index with the University of Tennessee. It was announced last month. Sustainability. It's called Fleet Sustainability Index, and you've probably heard of SmartWay. They track about 4,000 vehicles. Well, we track 500,000 vehicles in the U.S. and can tell you the make, model, the CO2, and so companies are now using that data when they do RFPs. Who's the right carrier for me to use, not just on service and cost, but what's their impact on the environment? So I think it all gets back to that. Right now, the focus is definitely on cost because of what's happening with inflation. Customer delivery, we started to see a change there. A net promoter score, customer satisfaction, where chief supply chain officers were asking us how our visibility could improve their net promoter scores to their customers. So,
great.
Truthfully, that's when we bought Convey in Austin, Texas, which does last mile technology, last mile delivery. And part of what they do is they say, hey, Rob, were you happy with that delivery from Neiman Marcus? Will you use them again? So.
And ultimately, John, isn't that what it's all about? We've talked about all the supply chain-y stuff, but isn't it about these customers being able to give better service to their customers?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it all starts with the customer. I always say, start with the customer, work backwards.
There you go. That's perfect.
I really think that's it. I know we talked about, maybe it's another question, but it's about what's going to happen with freight forwarders, what's going to happen with the carriers.
That's my next question. Thanks for leading that. What's your thought on that?
Everybody's buying into everybody. Maersk and CMA have invested in us, Project 44. I think the key thing there is you lived it. You saw APL and Sealand and the acquisitions through the years. And is it really one unified platform? That's going to be the thing. What's the experience to the customer? If I buy 10 different freight forwarders, what's my experience? So there's 10 different platforms. Can you give me visibility end to end? The big forwarders are going to get bigger. They're going to have the same challenge as they acquire people. What's the experience for the customer? And can you really give me the information, quickly? Niche forwarders, I always thought, always going to be in there. Somebody specializes in chemicals, trade shows, projects, wine and spirits. They provide a level of service that those industries want, and they want that personal touch. So I think there's always going to be a room for the intermediary. And certainly NVOs saved a lot of people's butts last year when the carriers were.
That's true.
Right. So there's always a place for that, I think. But technology, regardless if you're a niche player, the technology is still going to be very key. Customers now expect that Amazon type experience. Where's my shipment? When's it going to be here? That's what I see.
That might have answered my last question for you. I kind of was trying to save the best for last, which is where do you see technology in the next 5 years? And so I'll summarize a couple of things that you said that I thought were really critical. One is there's still not enough connective tissue in between companies. And so from the customer experience standpoint, to get one forwarder here and one carrier there and so forth is really difficult for them. So who's going to provide that connective tissue? I think is one thing you're saying. The other thing is connecting the first to final mile. I think that's really important. We're buying products in one place and selling in another. So those two things need to be bridged. And then I think the third thing that I heard you say, John, that I think is really interesting is that it's not just even for sales, it's also for your brand reputation, for your worker satisfaction. So do you feel like I guess my last question is, do you feel like the industry is finally ready, the supply chain industry and or the customers who have supply chains, to make that digital transformation? Do you think this will finally be the time? Maybe this is, step one, if only 1% of the companies are digitized and 80% of the data is outside of their company. So use two more quotes from you. Do you think this is finally the time that they'll take this journey and take it seriously? You talk to everybody. Do you sort of feel like there's more of a receptivity or a groundswell towards, for the first time, really taking this seriously and addressing it?
Again, I think that the whole pandemic and disruption accelerated that for the companies that are leaders. You always see that in every industry. Who are the leaders? Who are the followers? Who are the laggards? I think the leaders are jumped on it. The followers are coming faster than they used to, and the laggards still can't figure it out. It's amazing to me. But I think that the opportunity for all of us is, our mission statement is we make supply chains work. Not alone, but together with everybody in it, the shippers, yourselves, the ERP systems, the forwarders. We all have to work together, share information. That's that's something was not very well done, 30 years ago. Nobody wanted to share anything.
That's right.
I mean, it's really changed. So I think that's the big opportunity. I know speed of technology is really key. So when I got to Project 44, it took us months to onboard one truck carrier, right? We now do 1,500 a week, and 50% of those in 2 to 3 hours. So that speed is incredible. And now we're coming out with something called low code analytics, whereas it used to, if you had to put a dashboard together, it might take months. Well, we can now do it in a week. So I think all of those type of things are really key. How do we use new digital technology to provide better information to our mutual customers? And how is that data used further downstream? As I said, you initialize the purchase order, we track it, we get it back to you. We maybe get it to a planning system, a control tower. We feed data already to SAP and Oracle and Blue Yonder and O9 and Kinaxis planning systems that use that real-time data to improve their rapid response and what people should do. So it's really data-driven decisions with more current information. Companies who are using historical information from 3 years ago, I don't know what they were even looking at,
Okay, so I'm going to close on that note. You heard it directly from John Fitzgerald. Make decisions with data-driven empirical data, and the technology companies make it easier to consume your products and make it faster. So, John, it's been a delight. I smiled when I thought about this episode because you're one of my favorite people in the industry. I really appreciate your time. I know the audience will appreciate all your learnings. And we'll post your contact information, John. I know you're a teacher, so hopefully it's okay if somebody wants to reach out to you for more information. You're okay with us providing
absolutely.
Okay.
We're all in this. We're all in this together.
John, thank you very much.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, happy holidays, everybody.